My name's Susie. This is Prue, and we're we're the two remaining founder members of Sea Red Women's Workshop. We met in 1974. Just going to give you a very brief, tiny history of the workshop, and then we're going to talk about the posters. So Sea Red Women's Workshop was formed in 1974 and it closed in 1990. So quite a long-running workshop. Prue and I met at a meeting that we'd seen a notice in a radical newspaper. It's so long ago we can't remember whether it was Red Rag or Spare Rib, that said if you're interested in working on visual women's liberation issues but producing visuals, come to this meeting. So we did. In short, we ended up with screen printing choices, making posters, and called Sea Red Women's Workshop.
We were, sorry, just
go ahead.
That's because we were all members of the women's liberation movement.
Yes.
And we'd all been to art school and had certain skills that we wanted to use to advance the women's liberation.
Yes.
So that's why we
got together.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to say is that our experiences at art school are probably very different today, but maybe not quite so. Art school then was very male dominated, though sort of liberal and liberated, because we're just at the end of the 60s. All the tutors were male, and particularly the male fine arts and sculptors were the artists with a capital A. We wanted very much to get away from the received images of anything you produce that's visual has to be produced by an artist with a capital A, an individual, has to be signed, has to be numbered if it's prints. We wanted to produce things as a collective, so we never signed the work, we never individually took the work as our individual selves. It was always from the collective. We worked with over 45 women over that time period, about 4 or 5 at a time, whoever could fit in the studio. And we had ideas, we brought them to the workshop, we discussed them, took them away, changed them. Most discussions we did have were about the words, because we were very visual, but to actually get the right words on a poster was important to us.
We started off in a squat in North London. I was already producing posters for local tenants association, and there was a space within the same squat for us, and we produced our first lot of posters, put them up in the window, and got a shop window, and got a brick through within 24 hours. So we then moved to another premises, which is also a squat.
Yes, it was indeed. It was in South London this time, and it was also the premises for South London Women's Centre. So we were still working very closely with the women's movement. We were in consciousness raising groups, and a lot of women were at that time, because the slogan, "the personal is political," was quite a radical slogan at that time. Nowadays it's almost a given that if you have feelings or if you are oppressed in some way, those are just as valuable as, say, equal pay or any kind of abuse today. They're all recognised as valuable, but back in those days, the left, even the left, as well as obviously the right wing, was very negative about the women's movement. They were called us a distraction from the cause and unnecessarily sort of decorative and inconsequential. They didn't see then that it was going to become a really important area of protest, really.
We were all part of other campaigns as well, because we felt it was important that we were fighting in other causes, not only women's liberation, but we were able to widen our experience. And so we were around women's aid and homelessness and women in education and so forth. We all worked part-time. We did on average about two days a week, or we had, and then we had part-time jobs the rest of the time.
Yeah, but because we did charge for the posters, but we didn't make a profit. We all had part-time jobs. We all had part-time jobs or did childcare, so we could then, in those days, I don't know if you could do it now, we could then afford to have 2 days or 3 days a week at the collective. That was a conscious decision. Also, it was coming up to the time of Thatcher's Britain, so there wasn't a lot of work around for unemployed art students.
We had very, very little money, so our equipment was extremely basic. I don't know how many of you know about printmaking or are practicing artists, but it was all done on a silk screen, which is very cheap and easy to make. And in the very first instance, we used to hang our posters up on a washing line with pegs. But then gradually we were able to increase our equipment and get better equipment. But everything was, we went to auctions, which were print shops closing down. We got our equipment from there. We were given paper.
Half tins of ink, that kind of thing. That's why some of the posters, particularly at the beginning, were printed in slightly strange colours. It's what we had.
Yes. So our equipment was extremely basic. But standards were very, very important to us. As women, we were open to criticism of if we produced poor work, especially within a male-dominated printing trade. So every poster that left the workshop was quite, we had to make sure it was really well done. So, and I think that was despite our very, very basic equipment, and I think it's amazing in many ways that they came out as well as they did.
Yeah, as I said, I think we had about 45 women who came through the collective in all during that period of 74 to 1990. And we produced, I don't know, about 40 posters?
45.
45 again posters and calendars for the first 5 years.
Yes.
So this is a tiny selection. I've got the book there just because every single thing we ever did is in the book, and this book is in your bookshop here, looking at Cedric.
The calendars are rather amazing actually. It's a shame you can't see them because we had a different poster for every month, and you can imagine the work that involved really. We did 4 or 5 calendars.
4 or 5, yes.
And then we just ran out of steam really, so we stopped doing those.
Yes, but it was good with calendars because you could take a tiny idea and put it in, and it was then next to, say, I don't know, International Women's Day in Iceland, you know, photograph. So again, we could get a lot of varied stuff in.
We produced a catalogue.
Several, I think, didn't we?
Yes, several catalogues. So people could write in and ask to see the catalogue and then place orders.
Yes.
And they went internationally. The posters
Eventually,
went all over.
Yeah. My daughter still can't get her head around the fact that we eventually had a telephone, but that's about as high-tech as we were, because there was no internet at all. And I know it's a difficult thing to compute, but if people wanted our posters, they had to send letters asking for our posters, or go to a shop such as Compendium or News from Nowhere in Liverpool, or various other left bookshops and women's bookshops eventually. That there got to be quite a few more than there are actually now. So we'd leave our catalogues there and people would see them. But we sent to individuals as well a lot. And then, as Prue said, eventually they got to be a bit more international, so US and China even, and all kinds of places really. So that was exciting. Go on.
Yes. No, we got quite a lot of flack and quite a lot of criticism.
Oh, yeah.
And at one stage, our workshop was targeted by the National Front, and they poured all the tins of paint all over. They urinated on the floor. They just made a terrible mess everywhere. And then they left their NF written on the wall and on the door as we came in. And when the police came round, we pointed out the NF, we said it's National Front. And they said, no, I think it's the man's initials.
So we weren't exactly in a safe place there. It was in the middle of southeast London, which was in itself, around Walworth Road, was a very right-wing area at the time, and there were NF groups in the area, but they didn't like specifically our posters.
I think one thing that's quite important, the 3 founder members, we were white middle-class women, and we were very aware of that. And so it was very important to us to bring in other women whose life experience was very different to ours. And we were successful in doing that, as can be reflected actually within the posters. So that was, and it brought obviously much more lively, much more interesting posters generally.
Yeah.
And we ran an apprenticeship scheme.
That was later, wasn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
So a woman could come for 1 day a week for 3 months to learn how to print and to produce a poster around an issue that was important to her.
And just to show you how things have changed, we had a refugee from Colombia who was referred by Community Mental Health Services to be part of our collective. Now, that could not happen nowadays, I'd venture to say, but I think in those days there was a lot more maybe freedom or whatever, or breadth of vision in social and health services, but now they're so badly cut back, etc. But yes, Magdalena worked with us on posters about South America, which aren't here, but they're in the book. I think one of the things we want to do with all of our posters was to make them immediately understandable and accessible to a lot of women, and also where we could, we wanted to bring a bit of humour. If I may say, this is Prue in 76, 89, in her kitchen, and one of the things we were accused of occasionally was being far too serious and a bit negative, showing the situation as it is and being angry about the situation rather than showing something that is kind of easy to look at and make a bit of fun of. But I think if you make people laugh, you've got them, as long as it's not a sneering laughter. But again, with Thatcher as well, everybody knows who that is in the picture, I'm sure. So we wanted people to see it and understand it, but if we knew we could appeal to them on another level of humour, that was really important to us as well.
We also kept them extremely cheap. That was really important. We didn't want anybody not to be able to buy them because they were too expensive. Really. So we never made any money out of it, and it was only in 1983 that we actually got a grant from the GLC Women's Committee and from the Southwark Women's Committee, and that was enough to pay somebody with wages, and to also to get better equipment and new premises. So that was about 7 or 8 years after we founded.
The idea wasn't to make money, it never was, and the idea wasn't to make posters to sell, it was to further the cause of the women's movement that we were involved in through using our talents to produce visual material. And screen printing was the fastest, the easiest, the quickest way to get an idea out of your head and onto paper. So you design, take it to the group, discuss, change, amend, take it back, put it on a screen, take the screen home to draw the resist, the thing that blocked the ink going through, and print it the next day. So that's as fast as you could get in those days, short of just drawing everything by hand and sticking it on a wall. And we did stuff specifically for fly posting as well as actual posters as well.
Smaller posters on very lightweight paper. And we'd go out, groups of us, with a little bucket of wallpaper paste in the dark, sticking up these posters all over the place. And we also had stickers, which actually the poster isn't here, but we did a poster around the advertising and the awfulness of a lot of the advertisements and how women were sort of humiliated and belittled often in these advertisements. So we'd put up stickers saying, "This offends women," or "Sexist crap," we'd stick on them. Protest was one of the earliest posters, and that was done actually before the C-Red was founded. It's one that I did, and the DJ, but they became part of the C-Red sort of groupings, as it were. So when we started up C-Red, we already had a couple of posters to sort of get us on our way a bit. Protest, as you can see, that was done in several colours, and I'm not sure if you can see the drawings, but it's showing quite sort of little drawings of women in a very sort of negative view of how women are often seen as sexual objects or domestic workers or whatever. And as you can see, the woman is shouting, really. I mean, wanted it to be very bright and bold, which I think it is. And then disc jockey. That was a time when, I think it's still the case today, when a lot of women are alone at home. They're looking after small children, and their only companion was a disc jockey. And disc jockeys were often extremely sexist. And in fact, one or two of them actually have since, fairly recently, have been had up for sexual abuse, sexual harassment, the same ones that we were talking about there. And there's one disc jockey called Jimmy Young, that's right. He had this jingle every morning, which was, be young and beautiful. It's your duty to be beautiful. Be young and beautiful if you want to be loved. And that would come on at about 11 o'clock every morning. So that's what that poster is about.
I think it's also worth saying that a lot of the early posters were from our own experiences, or the other women that were in the collective with us as well. And that leads me on to My Wife Doesn't Work, very much done from one of our members' personal experience. And this is what it says in this little, so there's the chap in the bar talking about his wife not working, and then every hour of the day is documented, of the day and night. So she's still working. Depends what you call work, really. But it was very much, that was the sort of message those days that was quite common, that, you know, my wife's at home, she doesn't work. So it wasn't recognised that you were working if you're doing childcare or housework or building a home or looking after this kid's education. It wasn't seen as important or valid, even by some of the left. Then we've got capitalism. Capitalism also depends on domestic labour. It's, I think, sort of self-explanatory. It's a conveyor belt, and who's maintaining the conveyor belt? Well, we are. Home sweet home. And we borrowed a couple of images from the French poster makers from May '68. The chimneys and the roof of the factory and the smoke is a very symbolic way that they represented on their posters, and we did the same. Borrowing, I think we called it, and possibly the crane, but the idea of without women nothing would be happening, but still it's not recognised. This was the only poster we didn't design. We called it Big Boys Don't Cry. If you've had a close look at it, you'll see that these boy and a girl, the things that people say, from a baby to ending up with an ideal couple, they're made for each other completely, entombed by expectations and a very sexist way of looking at things that people say without even realising. And we loved this poster, and what was it? Gay Preston, wasn't it? Gay Preston did the original design, so we said, look, can we use this, can we promote it, do you want anything? And she said, no, fine, please do. So we're very lucky with that. It's just to say that the method before had been blue resist, so with the single colour non-photographic posters, you paint the negative on the screen. So you're painting blue where you don't want the ink to come through, that blocks the ink from coming through. So that would be tracing over a large drawing, copying it through. We went photographic. We got a photographic studio of some kind, so then we started doing photographic images. This is a very popular poster, but I think also it's also very positive, and we did consciously think we want to do some very positive images. So yeah, and we felt it was kind of international as well. A little stamp.
Yes.
That had our address and the word C-Red.
The slogan, Ho Chi Minh, he said many times that women are half of our people, and as long as women are not emancipated or not free, the people are not free. Is there life after marriage? And that was done at the time when there was a campaign of around Why Be a Wife, and questioning the whole thing of women being beholden to their husbands, and to be taking the husband's name, being financially and dependent on them, and it was also the same time as the marriage of Diana Spencer to Prince Charles, and so we had badges saying don't do it, die. Yeah, and how right we were. Yes, and it's also became the fifth demand of the women's liberation movement, legal and financial independence for women.
Yeah. So, and because it wasn't there, it was kind of unbelievable, as well as things like equal pay and that kind of side of things. Rape within marriage was still seen to be legal, you know. So that was way back, but it was still around, I think, maybe more recently than people think.
And I think it's also pointing out, which quite a few of our posters did from the beginning, because it was our own personal experience, is that you didn't want to be a sort of drudge, really. And it just was totally unfair that women were responsible for all the domestic work, childcare and everything, and yet still had a job outside. And men would come back home and expect supper on the table, and would no more dream of cleaning the toilet than they would anything really. So it was all about trying to get that across, really.
And then leaping on, this is an image from the calendar, which was quite a popular one. So it's from a Chinese revolutionary magazine, of which there were a few around in England at the time, because way back then there was an appeal to what we heard was going on in China. I'm not saying necessarily that we now know it probably wasn't quite as wonderful as everyone thought then, but we loved the image, and again we wanted a positive image of a woman doing something that you'd never think she could do. We had several others in our catalogue, and that's a very famous, I think, Chinese quote. Yes, women hold up half the sky. But this poster was a part of a couple that we did working with Brixton Black Women's Centre. At the time, two of us lived in Stockwell near Brixton in London, and it was a very influential Black Women's Centre there, with people like Olive Morris being a key part of those activities. And we worked with them on this design. I think it's fairly clear. We've got women protesting, but we've also got some situations where women had been attacked by the police or were facing racism. This area, which is not well illustrated in this poster, this was where you wrote meeting at 7 o'clock tonight at the Gresham Centre, or that kind of thing. But we can't show that because people put their own writing on it. To be a positive angle on what was an ongoing racist and oppressive centre, we thought it was very important to recognise that what is now called intersectionality, but that wasn't a word then, way back in the late 70s. But we just knew that from living and working in London and knowing people and knowing what was going on, that you can't just have feminism by itself and then anti-racism by itself or class war by itself. It has to, or the women's movement has to encapsulate all these views and value experience of all the women that were around.
This poster was done with women in Ireland and women against imperialism, and it was at the time of the IRA in the late 70s, and there were about 120 women in Armagh jail at that time. They were all, I think almost without exception, under 25. They were all young women, and they were all kept in very, very poor conditions. 23-hour lockup, and I think they only had 2 sanitary towels a month, and they were looked after by mainly male prison officers, screws, and generally their life was very difficult. And there was quite a lot of controversy about, and they wanted to be seen as political prisoners, not as criminal prisoners. That was very, very important to them. And that's one of the reasons why they were locked up in the way they were for the 23 hours a day. And there was a lot of controversy in the women's movement about whether we should be supporting people who were involved within the IRA. But a very moving letter came out of the prison saying, we are women, we are being treated in this way. If this isn't a feminist cause, what is? And so therefore we then took up the cause and did this poster for them with Women Against Imperialism and Women in Ireland.
I think an important point was that the male activists who were in the jail were treated as political prisoners.
Yes, yes, that's right. Yes.
And if that's not extreme discrimination, I don't know what is, but they were actively punished every single day. As political prisoners, you had more rights.
Yes, more privileges as a political prisoner than as a criminal.
Yes, Thatcher, one of my favourites. We thought we could have reproduced this poster many times over the last few years. We could have put Cameron's face on there. We could have put Theresa May's face on there, and we would have just had to add several noughts to all the money that's mentioned around. And there you go, and there's a modern poster for you. If you we look at posters now and think, oh, I would have made that word tough a lot bigger. You know, those kind of little things, but we've spent hours on the words for that.
Yes.
Fabulous photograph in the middle, we got from Conservative Central Office. We pretended to be huge fans and wrote a really creepy letter saying how wonderful Margaret Thatcher is, and we'd be so happy. We didn't sign it C Red Women's Workshop, of course.
To have a photo of our leader.
But we'd be so happy if we could have a photograph of our leader. Please, and we got one very quickly. And the thing with it's very fine dots, so we could reproduce it big without being broken up in the dots.
We were absolutely thrilled when this photograph came. It couldn't be better.
And
because she looked so anxious and everything, wasn't she? And sort of
so creepy. Oh. So we were overjoyed, and we got it for free, which is great. So yeah, unfortunately, it just can be repeated. And people do say that, well, you know, they say on the extreme, they say, well, what actually has changed? Quite a lot of things have changed, but there's still tons of work to do. We've got the legal stuff, but then, you know, do we really have equal pay? Probably not. But, you know, with the resurfacing of Me Too and various international movements, sort of personal issues around sexual abuse, etc., coming out. Still, and we're very pleased.
These are only just a small part of the full collection, actually. So,
did you also have contact with the Greenham Commons Peace Camp?
Oh yes, we did a Greenham poster. Photographic is in the book. And I think we had quotes.
And we went down to Greenham Common ourselves.
Several times, because that was in our lives rather than just with the collective.
I just saw, I don't know whether anyone knows about the Greenham Common, but one of the main women, Sarah Hipperson, who was right there from the very beginning in the peace camp there, that just died a couple of weeks ago. Amazing person, really.
So there's a photo, and that's the poster that we did, which was large size. But again, we used photographs taken at the scene. And
for anyone who doesn't know, sorry, because you're quite young, some of you, it was against a nuclear base. It's basically anti-nuclear weapons.
And it took years, but it worked.
Yes.
And they took them away, you know, so it was huge. But also the issue at the time was police brutality. At the site, women were dragged out of their tents and, you know, beaten and manhandled and left in the road, and it was a bad time. And we were just saying on the train coming up here with those people who've been arrested for stopping planes, leaving with purported illegal immigrants
who were being deported.
It reminded us of those days where you'd see stuff about support the 15 or support this group or whatever, and that's how you heard about things going on. Through posters and well, through posters a lot, actually.
Yes.
We'll take questions now. Have you got me? Sorry?
Looking back when you started, you wish you'd now have been more strident at the time.
No, we were quite
as far as you could have gone.
Well, could we have been more strident? Well, I think you need to see all of our posters.
I don't think so. No,
we were strident enough.
I think that can be off-putting for some people, really.
Because worries about being prosecuted, for instance.
No.
Was that
for what?
Worried about what?
Being prosecuted.
Prosecuted.
I don't know what time, what year D.H. Lawrence's novel was called, didn't it?
Lady Chatterley's Lover?
Must have been around about that time.
No, I think it was a bit after. It
was
after that.
We were 74, and I think that was late 60s. I may be wrong, but I can't see why we would be.
Yes, no, I think it was before that.
Why would that be?
Yes, I don't think so. Yes.
Oh, we did a lot of we did 3 sexually explicit posters as part of a women's health series, because women's health was really important to the women's movement. Discovering, you know, Our Bodies, Ourselves, the famous book, which I think many of the pictures, I'll refer to another thing, on the back wall there, inspirational work that came from America and then was produced for English, which had all the women's health issues and very accessibly written with photos and diagrams. The information you didn't get when you went to where you went to have an exam or to be tested or to get contraception. You had to be married to get contraception when we started making posters and prove it. You know, so it was a very different time. We weren't ever worried about being sued. We were a bit worried about being attacked, and then we were attacked by the National Front because they didn't like our posters. We did quite a few on the subject of racism, and a couple where we specifically said smash the NF.
Fight against racism.
Fight against racism, but smash the
front.
Fight against the National Front. Don't let racism divide us. That kind of thing. So we weren't. No, nothing really put us off. We did a couple of times. Yes. We never worried about being prosecuted.
No, because what's the point, really?
No.
You know, we didn't. If we would, then we wouldn't have been able to produce the posters.
Yeah.
And I think we wanted to appeal to quite a wide section of women. I mean, there was one poster which said castration on demand. I don't know how popular that was, but you know, it's not. You know, I think it
wasn't one of ours.
No, I think it's. I'm not sure how useful that is, really.
I think that the image of women in the early women's movement was very stereotypical. We're really angry, we're probably really ugly, we can't get a man, we've probably got hairy legs, and we're just really, really angry and irrational the whole time. And that was very much the stereotype of women who were protesting and making a noise. And we wanted to do that, but what we didn't want to do was put off women who maybe not be involved in the women's movement. We wanted to make sure we could appeal to a really broad swathe of women from different classes and groups, etc. So we produced a mixture of posters. I think that's how we got around it. Sorry, long answer.
Just going to say, sadly, I believe part of you're saying, but sadly, it seems that a lot of these issues still aren't going away. Worryingly, in the London papers, I was down just recently in London, there's an increasing confusion, especially amongst younger men and women, as to what actually constitutes a date rape.
Is there?
There's a big debate about that now.
Is there?
Oh yes.
Well,
it's in fact moving backwards then.
Well, I think having been a youth worker for much of my working life, because obviously it may not be obvious, but we left in '83. And then people say, well, what have you been doing since then? Well, working full time, basically. So I worked in women's and children's health and then with youth workers. And that's one of the issues that's really important. And I think particularly with the latest, do any of you watch EastEnders? I don't anymore, but it was in the news recently because there was a date rape that was coercive and apparently was done very well. So a lot of women's groups responded to this. So we know it's still an issue, but I think what is clear is you can get information as a young person from sexual health clinics or women's health or supportive clinics or places where they will have leaflets. I used to work for the FPA, Family Planning Association. We produced a leaflet on date rape and abuse within relationships that might not necessarily be just violent, but might be more coercive, as you say. So I think the difference were when we were around, there was nothing. And what is different now is there is information, but
I think it needs to start in primary schools, really.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and it's not really. I think that much wider range of debate and education around sex is really important.
Sue Adler of the ILEA.
Yes.
She was a policy librarian, senior policy librarian, and her job was to distribute material that would try to change things.
Yes.
Very young age and onwards. Resistance even then.
Yes.
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 I wanted to hear more about.
Going to have to talk a bit louder.
Okay. I'm a big fan of your work. And
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to hear more about how did you collaboratively come up with your images and more about your discussions. How hard was it to?
Sometimes it was quite hard. It was more that an idea. We'd have meetings every week, but sometimes we just have ideas meetings. So what are the posters we're going to look at next? What's current? What's going on for us? What do we want to bring to the table? And whilst I wouldn't say it was necessary arguments, there was a lot of discussion.
We had some pretty fiery arguments.
Oh yes, as well, definitely. And that was sort of natural, really. It felt natural.
Yes.
And people had different views, and different people said different things. But usually the person that came with the idea would hear what we're saying and then come back with a revised version, or not, if it didn't need it. And then, again, the process would go on until we ended up with the finished poster. Everybody could design and did design if they wanted to. Everybody could print, everyone could clean a screen, everyone knew how to do photographic negs. So we was very keen to get everybody to be able to do everything.
We kept a very clear diary.
Yeah.
It was really important because there could be quite a number of us passing through, and we needed to know what had been done the day before and what needed to be done on that day, and what the situation was, what needed to be posted where, and whatever. So we were pretty well organised on the whole. And in fact, it was Sarah, two of our collective have died. Julia, who was at the very beginning a founder member, she died in 1979. And Sarah, she died in 2009. And Sarah was really the one who kept us all sort of well organised.
Yeah.
And it was important actually because it could very easily dissolve into chaos, really.
Yeah, she did the book specifically as well, which was very good.
And I think that was one of perhaps our most successful things in a way, which made it that we could produce the posters that we did, is that we were well organised, and we were all on the whole quite reasonable people. And although we did argue, it never destroyed us, which it did in some organisations.
Quite a few actually.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that was important. But yes, long answer. But it was a process, and I think also, particularly in the beginning, we worked with each other a lot. So it wasn't like a new idea would just come, oh my God, out of the blue. It was probably in our radar, or things we might be discussing amongst ourselves already.
Or women came in and said, this is really important to me. I want to make a poster about this, and so we would then enable her to do that. And I think, as we said in the beginning, those of us who were sort of part of the collective never took any personal whatever for an individual poster. They were done by the collective. Nobody got any personal sort of credit for it, and that was really important to us.
People still ask, well, who did that one? The group.
The group.
You know, so even though it's all over the book and all over everything we say about being a collective.
And I think a lot of artists found that, artists with a capital A found that really difficult.
Yes, we had, being from art school, we had friends who had also been at art school and some of the male artists. And we did talk to them and have a laugh with them about this, but we'd say yes, and so we discussed the ideas and we'd produce it as a group, and they'd say, but you can't do that because somebody must hold the pencil. Who holds the pencil? Like that would be the person who'd put their name at the bottom of it, and we just said we'll do, and it was a bit like they just went they couldn't get it. And maybe I'm hoping that that's not the case nowadays, if anybody's doing graphics or art or
well, I expect that you do need to make a living. Obviously, you do as individuals, and therefore your name will be attached to things. But that it's not the sort of it's an overbearing need for for personal recognition. I think we felt.
I think particularly in those days when it was very much you were either an individual artist with a capital A or really not worth mentioning. We wanted to make a point, and that was also quite common within radical movements and left-wing movements, that you were a collective, you were a group. Yeah, it made things longer to work out and the process was longer, etc. But we came up with material, and we also encouraged other people to work with us as well.
Getting back to the whole theme of sort of feminism and resistance, this was our way of resisting. We had a skill. And we were able to use it, and we had an amazing amount of fun doing it. Actually, it was really great. It was a very lively, sort of sparky time, really, and it would be great if we could get that back again in some ways. I think we were very lucky to be when we were, and we were also lucky that we were able to maintain ourselves, really, working part-time.
Yes, I don't think financially you could survive on 2-3 days a week work. I was a part-time youth worker.
I taught art in Holloway prison. I
think financially nowadays that would be hard, but it was possible then. So, you know, it wasn't an impossible thing. We
and
weren't.
we both of us lived in semi-communal houses, in fact, where we ate together with people in the same street and shared our resources, really. You lived actually more communally than I did, I think.
Yeah, in the house, yes, we did. But again, we had a rota, and there was 2 blokes, 3 women, and the 2 blokes had never cooked anything other than the fried egg before, but they were living with us, 2 of us from the collective. And
they were 2-star Michelin chefs by the time we finished.
Oh my God, they're much better than us now. I mean, brilliant chefs now.
Yes.
One of them just went and got a recipe book and started churning out wonderful books.
So it all comes back
meals.
to domestic work, and which was basically a thing we all had in common.
It freed us up to do the work we wanted to do. Any more questions?
How are we doing?
Did you say lots?
I think it's
a question maybe from somebody else.
It's 3:05.
I'm not stopping.
No, but I don't know whether anybody else wants to.
Any more questions? Yes.
Do you think the workshop would have carried on as long as it did if it hadn't received that funding grant? Do you think?
No, I think what happened was, while silk screen printing accuracy improved, so did offset litho really, really quickly. It became really cheap, and you could produce a lot of stuff very quickly. But swiftly after that was the advent of IT and the internet. It was no longer the fastest way to do stuff, and that was our criteria. It wasn't because we wanted to do colourful stuff, but we didn't necessarily want to do it because it was screen printing. That was just the quickest way, much faster than offset litho at the time, the fastest way. Or unless you had one of those photocopying machines, and only us of a certain age will remember them, but it was cranked by hand and roneoed.
But in fact, the workshop changed in 1983. It became, no more posters were produced of this sort. Yes, they were all reprinted, and it became a sort of like a semi-commercial print shop for local organisations and community groups. And very successfully too.
Yeah, we did, one of the things we haven't said is that we kept doing posters for events and local things that were going on.
Yes, that's true. Yes, which actually
stopping hospital closures, local women's events, etc.
And we
got
charged
paid for them.
Yes, and that obviously helped our income. Enabled us to buy inks and paper and so forth.
But I think we're well aware we were very much of that time, and amazing we kind of kept going that long. But it did tail off a bit towards 1990 as new media, new technology came through. And that presented a lot of other options.
It's interesting because these posters were under our beds for 20 years.
35.
And we'd pretty well forgotten about them, in fact. And then the V&A had an archive of them and got in touch with us. And then the ICA, it's the Institute of Contemporary Art in London, saw them and wanted to put on a small exhibition, and we thought, crikey,
really?
So really, yes. And so we got them all out, and I think we were really pleased to see them. I think we'd forgotten the energy, because what they do have is an awful lot of energy, and I think that comes out. I mean, we were very energetic. We were young,
we were really energetic.
We're older women now, but then there was a lot of energy, and they came out, and they have been very popular since then.
With the book and with our internet presence, I think they call it, the Facebook and the website.
We have a website.
People can see the stuff and they get in touch with us for all kinds of reasons, and that's really important to us, that anybody can get in touch with us. It doesn't have to just be, top level galleries or whatever. It can be anybody, and we're very happy for that.
As part of our collective now, there was 2 women who joined in 1981 and 82, and they both left in 83, so they weren't with the C-Ray for very long, but we still do work together, and we still meet together, and they were there when it became like a commercial, when it changed.
Only for a couple of years, and they helped with the book as well. So we've got all the posters the collective produced during that time. Any more questions? No?
Can I ask another one?
Yeah, go on.
if you had a target, I'm not sure how you form these ideas. Do you get together for a monthly meeting and say, well, you know, this month we're going to produce, or let's have a look at your posters, we'll choose that one.
We had weekly meetings.
Weekly meetings, but from the number of posters, it seemed almost monthly we produced.
Not really, because we had 45 posters, but we, over, I don't know, what was it, 1974 to 1990. So 1983 is when the new poster, so 10 years. No, I'm not saying we always had posters to discuss. We had weekly meetings if we had new ideas. Yeah. It wasn't like it was a regular meeting, but it had lots of other stuff in it, as well as if there was a new idea, it came to that meeting. It wasn't a separate meeting for the ideas.
Looking back over the years then,
yeah.
if there were targets, which was the leader? Was it government or was it men? I'm not saying they're mutually exclusive, but
I think our target...
Which of those two was your greatest?
I think I'll just answer that question differently, if I may. Our target wasn't just one thing. It was sexism, racism, oppression, those kind of things, rather than
equality.
We wanted equality, but there was several of us who wanted a bit more than equality. Yeah. That poster, the half the sky one, we changed that. We put the words "more than" in after "women hold up." So women hold up more than half the sky, because 52%. Come on, you know, we are more than. So we didn't have a target this week, or this is our target now. We had things that were inflecting us, our friends, our colleagues, and the society in general, that brought up in us and the other women who worked with us the need to respond and to do something to make people angry, to make people think, to make people question. I think we had the see-red questioning eyebrow, which comes up in a lot of posters, but I think here it's only seen in the woman on protest, because one of those eyebrows is going, what is going on? And we wanted women to ask that question, not only of themselves, but with other women, and talk about those things. So we wanted to inspire women to do stuff and to protest and look at stuff hard, rather than going, this is our target, this year we're looking at men, or this year we're doing this. We responded to lots of things. Yes?
From what I can see of what you've done, it looks more that you were for rather than fighting against.
Nicely put. Well put, yes. I was trying to sort of say that. You said it very neatly. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Did I see? No. Do you want? Yeah.
Sorry,
it's okay.
Question, but, I was really intrigued when in the book you talk about your premises as well, and you also say that some of you took up plumbing and electrics.
Do you want to do that?
So how important was it to look after that space, and how much work did it take for you?
It was very important. It was a matter of principle, actually, that we were able to do. We couldn't do the electrics, obviously, and we could do a certain amount of plumbing, but not all of it. That we did all the work ourselves in that way. Yes, that was important.
And we were taught by a group that was around then, because there was a lot of groups springing up, and this was Women in Manual Trades.
Yes,
which is quite a well-known group of women who were working in the business but suffering a huge amount of discrimination and sexism. Set up their own group, and they worked with women as needed.
So there were plumbers and women plumbers and women electricians.
And but we did all the decorating and the walls and scraping the floor and scrubbing things. Yes. It felt, if we're doing this with print, if we're making it the thing where people do all of it, this is all of it as well, because this is our premises.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Are any of you doing any printing at the moment? Or I mean, are any of you visual artists? Or no.
Yeah.
Yes. You are. Yes.
When I was with printmaking.
Do you?
Oh, cool.
Yes. What sort of printmaking do you do?
Actually,
do you? Yes. Yes. I like etching very much. Yes.
Okay. If there's no more questions, if you want to join me on thanking Kieran and Susie for this talk.
Thank you. We're